It is 5:45, so I will call to order the October 2nd, 2025 regular meeting of the Hendersonville City Council. We begin our meetings with a silent invocation for people to pray or meditate as they choose, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll rise, please. You'll join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, the nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. We open with public comment time. This evening, we have two people signed up here. Is anyone online seeking recognition to be able to speak during general public comment?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, so if you could limit your comments to about 5 minutes, we would appreciate it. What I'll do is call your name if you'll come to the microphone, and then give your name and your address for the clerk's record, please. First is Mimi Kaufman.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you very much for the chance to talk to you. My name is Mimi Kaufman. I live at 106 Fairway Knoll Drive in Hendersonville. I'm coming today to talk about some of the things that were talked about at the last City Council meeting where there was no public comment. At the last meeting, the proposed plans for 1A and 1B of Tom's Park and the Whitmire Center were presented. And at that time, Mr. Conant very kindly referred to the bridge players having been heard in the planning for these proposals. But I would say today we were only partially heard because really our underlying concern for dedicated space for seniors and handicapped individuals were not addressed during the course of the presentation. The needs for the bridge group and the shuffleboard were mentioned, but the overall need for senior services were not addressed. It does seem incredible that a city the size of Hendersonville does not have a dedicated senior center. Even Saluda, which is about half our size, has a senior center. There are wonderful programs for people of all ages who are able, and for adults and children. But the closest thing that we had to a senior center was the Whitmire Center, which of course is now being demolished and taken away by the city, understandably after that meeting, due to the costs of various kinds arising from Helene. However, this does not remove the need for dedicated activity space for seniors and physically handicapped individuals. These plans, particularly 1B, impact not only the bridge players, but the shuffleboard players as well, because it involves demolishing the center and not replacing it with any kind of a building. Both of these groups have health benefits for the participants, economic benefits to the city, because both groups attract area players, as well as special events which attract area crowds to our group and to the city. They patronize our restaurants, our hotels, and our adult entertainment sites. The new Plan 1A does not indicate dedicated space for handicapped individuals and seniors, and is dubious about the necessary courts for the shuffleboard group. We will be left to compete, it sounds like, for space usage with groups that are already being served by the city in other areas. Our Bridge Club is not just a bunch of card players. We are a community of people who meet several afternoons a week and enjoy the stimulation of competitive play for nationally recognized points, as well as the enjoyment of each other's company. We celebrate each other's birthdays, special anniversaries, and we care about each other's health and well-being. We engage in an activity that has been scientifically proven to sharpen mental acuity, helping fend off dementia systems, reduce your blood pressure, and believe it or not, the New England Journal of Medicine just released a study that said Continued participation in bridge actually builds your immune system. As we found in the months following Helene, finding a place that is not only handicapped accessible, but also has adequate parking, lighting, and restroom facilities that we had in Whitmire is nearly impossible. We have players who use walkers, canes, wheelchairs, and oxygen. It's still working up here, but physically there are challenges. We have few other options for recreation, and now there will be none provided by the city with the demolishing of Whitmire Center. While there are plans for new facilities, there seems to be no stated intention of provided dedicated usage for the seniors and handicaps. Since I'm about to turn 86 in a few days, I'm probably not going to be around to see some of these facilities that y'all are talking about building, but the needs for these groups will still exist. Mountain Aging Partners says that the number of seniors in Western North Carolina is projected to grow by 40% in the next 20 years. So you can see that there is definitely a need there. So if I've used the word dedicated too much in this statement, it's because this is what's missing from these proposals. Please reconsider more focused plans for those who are not being accommodated by the current proposals. There should be a place where these individuals can meet, socialize, and do much more than just play bridge or just play shuffleboard. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Kaufman. Chris Daniels?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members. I'm Chris Daniels. I live at 1540 Kensington Road. So I'm the director of Bike Walk Hendersonville. We're a local nonprofit here in town. I'm here to provide some input on the proposed transportation bond that was talked about at the last meeting. And I'm sure we'll be talking about this more over the next number of months. So this is kind of just sort of some initial thoughts. For some context, our group started a few years ago, basically after a conversation between myself and one of my coworkers about how we didn't feel like we could safely move around our town without a car. Particularly, we were worried about the safety of our kids going to and from school and other activities. And I know from conversations with many of you that y'all feel the same way. From our group, we do want to share that we've been really impressed over the last few years with the responsiveness from city council, from city staff, in terms of openness to listening to us, taking initiative on things that we've recommended. Things like staff have gotten outside grants to install the shared lane markings, to draft the new bicycle plan, which I'll be hearing about later, and Dr. Hensley's efforts to bring a bunch of leaders together to talk about safety education for kids on bikes in our schools. So we just want to first thank you guys for being open and listening, and being very, very, very responsive to that. So I think we're on a very good path. However, I would say that despite these efforts, we're still very far from our goal. I've personally gone over the numbers from NCDOT. Our mountain region has the highest per capita pedestrian fatality rate in the state. Henderson County, based on the most recent data, has twice the pedestrian and bike fatality rate as Mecklenburg County. So if you can imagine, you're walking around our town, you're twice as likely to die from being hit by a car here as you are in Charlotte. That's not good. You know, that's not what we're aiming for. That's not what we want our town to be like. And we're a small enough town that we have a little more control over things. And I think we can change that. But you can imagine, it's no wonder that fewer kids are walking or biking to school than ever before. So I guess as we think about the transportation bond, our main goal is for us to all consider our priorities. During the presentation at the bond last meeting, we talked about complete streets and safety. But if you noticed, it was the very last one of the priorities on that list. It kind of felt like it was a bit of an afterthought. Even though there is some money in there, that's a great start. also ADA compliance was sort of mentioned more as a mandate rather than an opportunity. Right? If you noticed in that presentation, only 2% of our curb ramps are ADA compliant. So basically none of our curb ramps in town, 98% are not ADA compliant. I know this personally because I've tried to push 2 kids around this town in a stroller and it is impossible. I mean, I think we all know our sidewalks are terrible, in general. I can't imagine trying to get around town in a wheelchair. And so while we welcome the idea of the transportation bond, I think it's a great way to leverage the city's resources and get things done around the city. We would also just question the priorities that are guiding the allocation of funds. The current total amount proposed for complete streets is not enough to even cover the top 2 projects in our current bike plan. And that was drafted in 2017. These things are expensive. We realize that all of this stuff we're talking about is expensive. And we have to make choices on money. But I guess our main goal is to focus on what are our actual priorities, what are our values? Are we going to prioritize pavement condition index, or are we going to prioritize safety? So that would be my point. Smooth roads are nice, but safe roads are absolutely necessary. So we're really looking forward to working with y'all on this. And I'm sure we'll be talking more over the next number of months. So thank you for your time and effort on all this.
Thank you, Mr. Daniels. Right, council, you have the agenda before you. Is there anything you would like to have added to or removed from the agenda? Or if not, a motion to approve?
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, got the agenda. Consent agenda, is there anything on the consent agenda that someone would like to have moved to the regular agenda so it can be discussed? Or if not, a motion to approve those items.
Madam Mayor, I move that City Council approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, motion carries, and we took care of a whole lot of business all in one vote. All right, now we have some presentations. I'm going to come out in front. The first one I can have Bill and Elizabeth. You're gonna miss you. But, so you don't forget us, we have a resolution of respect and appreciation. Whereas on the 2nd day of October, 2025, Bill Moss and Elizabeth Wilson Moss are leaving Hendersonville to start a new adventure as Grammy and Pa Bill, as they are known to their 3 grandchildren, and as mom and dad to their 2 children in Boise, Idaho, where they all reside. We, the governing body, employees, and residents of the city of Hendersonville, wish to acknowledge publicly the contributions made by Bill and Elizabeth Moss. And whereas Bill Moss is a Chapel Hill native and graduate with a journalism degree in 1976 from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He paid his dues with stints at the Marshville Home News, the Thomasville Times, the Salisbury Post, the Knoxville News Sentinel, the St. Pete Times, and the Roanoke Rapids Daily Herald before coming to Hendersonville in 1998 as executive director of the Daily Times News, a New York Times regional paper at the time. And whereas Bill Moss, founder of the newspaper, the Hendersonville Lightning, went live with the Lightning newspaper April 24th, 2012, and the first issue debuted May 9th, 2012. after which he quickly picked up 1,150 paid subscribers and launched a free website. And whereas the Lightning is a paid circulation paper and qualifies to carry legal ads and public notices, which is important reading for the Hendersonville community. The Lightning has served news for Hendersonville, Henderson County, Mills River, Fletcher, Flat Rock, Laurel Park, Etowah, Edneyville, Green River, and Saluda for the past 13 years. And whereas in 2014's NCPA newspaper competition, the Lightning won 10 awards, and the Lightning quickly became known for excellence in journalism. Over the course of 8 years, the Lightning has won nearly 100 awards, and Bill's success also made national news when it was featured in Forbes magazine. And whereas Elizabeth Wilson Moss grew up in South Jersey before graduating from the University of Florida with a degree in journalism and communications. Following an award-winning career as a newspaper reporter and magazine editor for the Miami Herald, the St. Petersburg Times, the Boston Globe, Florida Trend magazine, and the Times News of Hendersonville, she continued to serve the Hendersonville community in various capacities. She served as the Director of Community Affairs and Outreach in Pardee UNC Healthcare's administration. Elizabeth also worked as a fundraiser and major gifts officer for the Pardee Hospital Foundation. Whereas Elizabeth is retiring on October 3rd, 2025, after 8 years as Executive Director of Interfaith Assistance Ministry. IAM provides crisis assistance with a range of essential items and services, including food for a week for each family member, clothing, linens, personal hygiene supplies, heat and utility bills, rent and mortgage payments, medications, pet food, and other basic needs. And whereas under her tenure as Executive Director, Elizabeth has grown IAM, including the planning and construction of the IAM thrift store, the addition of the IAM mobile pantry, which provides weekly food in the lowest income areas of our community, where transportation access is limited, and pursued and provided 2 ongoing new revenue streams and raised $5 million in grants. IAM has provided services to 1 in 9 families in Henderson County. Whereas her community involvement and volunteer service include past president of the Hendersonville Kiwanis Club, vice president of United Way of Henderson County, a co-founding chair of Women United, past president of Safe Lights Board of Directors, a co-founding chair of Henderson County Women United, a Henderson County Chamber board member, president of Henderson County's Partnership for Health, chair of the Hendersonville Wise annual campaign, a children's Sunday school teacher, vacation Bible school director, and an elder and deacon at First Presbyterian Church of Hendersonville. Henderson County's Education Foundation Board, vice president of Henderson County's Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, president of Hendersonville High School's Band Boosters, and has held various PTO positions at Henderson County Schools. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Hendersonville, on behalf of the employees and residents of the City of Hendersonville and customers of the Hendersonville Lightning, that the mayor and City Council extend to Bill and Elizabeth Moss their sincere appreciation for all their loyal and dedicated service to the City of Hendersonville and surrounding areas. Council, you've heard the resolution. All in favor, say aye. Want to say anything? I do. Want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you. Which way do I face? I've never done it before. Only that I'm really honored and humbled and proud to receive this. Thank you for tolerating me for these 27 years. I have a lot of respect for this council, for both Johns, John Connett and John Mitchell, as if we needed to see with as much drama and effectiveness back last October, a year ago, 27 with Helene. Incredible leadership that I'll never forget. I'm glad I got to see it firsthand. But one more thing, Lowell Griffin had a great idea when he hired an PIO in Allison. And John Connett said, well, I'll see your great idea and I'll raise you a City of Hendersonville PIO. And John Mitchell got his idea of Mike Morgan from that, I'm convinced. And John Connett was a pioneer in this town of having a full-time PIO. And I can tell you, that's really important and it works. So thank y'all. Thank all the viewers. I'm not gone completely. She's on the ground, Amy Bedingfield McCraw. And I can see you from 2,200 miles away, as I do sometimes now from 5 miles away in the Flat Rock Bureau. So if I call you up, like you always are good about doing, please call back. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm really humbled. This is the nicest thing anybody's ever done for us. And I've loved the support from the city, the ARPA funds, so important to us, and all the special appropriations. Thank you, Council and Manager Connett. It's really hard for us to leave this community that we love. We've been here 27 years. We raised our 2 children here, and we just love everything about it and have felt really honored to be in positions where we could give back in a really impactful way. So I've really enjoyed working with Mayor Volk on many different committees and projects, and Manager Connett, some interesting phone calls about water over the years. I've worked closely with Melinda and got to know the good hire of the chief, police chief, and working with Allison and especially Jenny Floyd recently. Sorry, Jenny, I need to update my resume a little more and put the city not homeless, home unhoused. Yes, I keep referring to homeless, but that's not the correct lingo anymore. But anyway, thank you for all the opportunities and the time here. And we wouldn't be leaving if our kids hadn't been begging us for the last 3 years. They had to sign in blood. They were going to stay there. So thank you all. We're very honored and appreciative.
We have one more proclamation this evening, and that is for fire prevention 2025. Okay, Robert, over to Tom. All right, so this is a proclamation, Fire Prevention 2025. Whereas the city of Hendersonville, North Carolina is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Hendersonville. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern, both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas home fires caused 3,670 civilian deaths in the United States in 2023, according to National Fire Prevention Association, and fire departments in the United States responded to 345,000 home fires. And whereas smoke alarms sense smoke well before you can, alerting you to danger in the event of fire, in which you may have as little as 2 minutes to escape safely. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half. And whereas the city of Hendersonville residents should be sure everyone in the home understands the sound of the smoke alarms and knows how to respond. And whereas the City of Hendersonville residents who have planned and practiced a home fire escape plan are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a fire. And whereas the City of Hendersonville residents will make sure their smoke and carbon monoxide alarms meet the needs of all their family members, including those with sensory or physical disabilities. And whereas the City of Hendersonville fire responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas the City of Hendersonville residents that are responsive to public education measures are better able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2025 Fire Prevention Week theme, Charge into Fire Safely, lithium ion batteries in your home. Work to educate everyone about using these batteries safely. The campaign stresses how important it is to buy, charge, and recycle safely when it comes to lithium ion batteries. Now, therefore, I, Barbara Volk, Mayor of Hendersonville, do hereby proclaim October 5th to 11th, 2025 as Fire Prevention Week throughout this city. And I urge all the people of Hendersonville to plan and practice a home fire escape for Fire Prevention Week 2025 and to support the many public safety activities and efforts of the City of Hendersonville's fire and emergency services.
Thank you.
Congratulations. There you go. Okay, you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank
You
you,
go
Madam
right
Mayor. Thank you, City Council. Thank you, city staff and residents. So lithium ion batteries, are in everything these days. So as home fires get hotter, quicker, the lithium batteries are important that you learn how to take care of them. Okay. Never charge your power tools, cell phones, anything like that longer than they should. By charging these batteries over and over, and they just get hotter, right? And so as they get hotter, they start to break down, and that's when we get the fires. In the past few years, we've had a handful of decent fires here in Hendersonville that have been directly caused by charging of lithium batteries. They're a very hot, quick fire, and it gets out of control very fast. Whenever you're charging your cell phones, don't charge them on your pillow while you're asleep. Charge them on a hard surface like a counter, and only charge them while you're awake and for the needed time that it needs to be charged. They don't need to be charged 24 hours a day. And if you're charging these things, they're just going to start to break down and degrade. And that's when we start getting faulty lithium batteries. Don't dispose of the batteries in regular trash. There are different websites and there's different areas within the community where you can take lithium batteries to get them disposed of properly. Lithium batteries in your normal trash or recycling bin can mix with other things that will cause fires, typically in the trash truck or in the trash bin in front of your house. So as we go through this week, we're going to try and educate as many kids and as many public residents as we can about lithium ion batteries and the different types of responsibilities that you have having these devices. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we have a North Carolina League of Municipalities Risk Reduction Review Award. Okay.
Well, good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Blair Myham, Police Chief. I'd like to introduce Chet Effler with the North Carolina League of Municipalities to talk to you about our risk reduction review.
Thank you, Chief. Good evening. My name's Chet Effler and I work with the North Carolina League of Municipalities as a public safety risk consultant. After retiring 30 years from the Department of Insurance and having with the law enforcement unit, it was just a perfect fit for me to join the league to assist cities. And I appreciate you for your time this evening in talking about law enforcement risk review. What is a review? It is a comprehensive agency review of over 40 high liability areas to ensure the agency adheres to the best practices and industry standards within law enforcement. Some of the areas that we review are police pursuits, use of force, employment practices, training, and much more. Steps involved in the review that were conducted included an in-depth policy review with proofs of compliance. And I think Monica got tired of all my emails, but she was always ready. I just want you to know she was always ready to answer and done a great job. And it also included an on-site agency assessment that I conducted with equipment and facility inspections, officer interviews, and observation of your daily operations. And I'm proud to report that Hendersonville has completed the law enforcement risk review process to add to their many agency achievements. And to put this into perspective for you, that we represent roughly 400 and some cities across North Carolina and at the league, and roughly 200 made a commitment to participating in a risk review, and only 90 have completed that. And so this is Hendersonville's third, you were one of the first, that's right, third times of doing it, that's right. The chief and staff members have prioritized this initiative, and I just want you to know they were wonderful to work with, and they were very open, transparent, and receptive during the process. And I would like to thank the chief and all of his staff. And we'd like to present the North Carolina League of Municipalities recognizes Hendersonville Police Department for completing the law enforcement risk management review and proactively serving the community in professional manners while taking steps to minimize the risk to your citizens and officers. Presented today. Thank you, Chief.
Okay, congratulations. Thank you. And our last presentation is an update from the Henderson County Behavioral Health Coalition. Melissa Whitmer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you for inviting me this evening to talk about the Henderson County behavioral health strategies and coalitions that we're currently working on. Perfect. My name is Melissa Whitmire. I am the public health strategist for behavioral health for Henderson County. We are currently working on developing numerous strategies, and part of that work began from a needs and gaps assessment that I did as a contractor for the Henderson County Department of, for the Henderson County Partnership for Health. So part of this work is really focused on the suicides that we had happening here in Henderson County over the last 3 to 5 years, where we saw an increase of our rate of suicide. And so the Partnership for Health brought me in to talk about how can we develop new strategies, what's happening in the world of evidence-based approaches that we can start to implement. Those strategies are based on work and research that I've done in the field for about 20 or 25 years, where I partnered with university systems and the Florida Council for Community Mental Health. So, and doing that work and the research, we came up with several strategies that we wanted to take a look at. But first, we looked at what the gaps were in Henderson County. As you can see, there were numerous gaps based on interviews that I had. Mr. Connett and I had met and talked about what you were seeing from a city level. I'm sure these gaps aren't going to be surprising to anybody. The next step of the analysis was really taking a look at the needs and what were the things that we could do immediately within Henderson County to start to impact both our rates of suicide, those that were struggling after a suicide loss, and also the mental health of people in Henderson County. The ones that you see highlighted are the needs that, as I looked to transition into this role about a year and a half ago, what I could start to work on as a new public health strategist for the county. So we have been working on strengthening our school-based mental health, looking at suicide prevention, intervention, and role play trainings. How can we then impact lethal means restrictions and safety? There's trainings that we looked at that I'll talk about. I also knew that we could start to implement and increase our behavioral health training and funding in the county. Due to the losses by suicide, we wanted to take a look at how do we help families and communities that have had a loss. So what do grief and loss workshops look like for the community? What might support groups be that we could implement? And then also taking a look with the hospital systems, how could we help with people that have identified as having non-suicidal self-injury or self-harm behavior? We've also looked at suicide loss communities and then a more enhanced behavioral health coalition, and then increasing public awareness and education. So lots of things that we could work on, but those were the things that we decided that we would step into. As I wrote the needs and gaps analysis, what I thought that I could help and impact immediately was the Zero Suicide Framework, which is a strategy around helping health and behavioral health care systems enhance both screening, training, interventions, postvention, care coordination, which is the work that we had on the grants for about a decade. Also looking at the implementation of Sources of Strength, which is an evidence-based peer leader program with our schools. We looked at enhancing suicide postvention. So how could we help those families that had lost a loved one working within our system of care? And also trying to implement psychological autopsies, which are looking at deaths by suicide and what happened and how can our system of care better support the families and the communities. And then also the implementation of the CALM training, which is counseling on access to lethal means. So we started this strategy back in about April or May of last year. So when I stepped in, these were really the things I was focusing on. So in Zero Suicide, what we typically begin with, first and foremost, is trying to identify champions within communities. We know that we can't do this work alone. So who are the people in our communities that are passionate about suicide prevention and intervention? And so I've been looking and working with those folks here in the community. We've also talked about how do we implement screenings and assessments and have common language around suicide. That has changed in the last decade. So talking with our systems about what does that current language look like and how do we start to report back to our national violent death reporting system and at a state level. If we don't have common language, we're not talking about the same losses, the same ways that people are dying. So we want to make sure that that language is consistent. We've also started implementing trainings, question, persuade, refer our trainings. It's an evidence-based community suicide prevention training. We've implemented comprehensive suicide intervention workshops, so giving folks more skills on how to be able to talk about suicide in their interventions. The CALM training will begin the beginning of 2026. We identified funding to implement that. We have worked on postvention and grief. I'll talk about that in a minute with a support group beginning. We're looking at funding to implement a training called Collaborative Assessment and Identification of Means for Suicide. And that's a treatment training for clinicians. Most clinicians are not trained in how to treat a person identified as at risk for suicide. They have to step into that. And so our hope is that we identify funding to have more clinicians trained in Henderson County in that. We've been writing grants for a care transition program, which is helping people leave acute units like the hospital system, our jail system, and other detox, so that when they're leaving, we're connecting them to resources for 90 days. And then also working with our organizations on policy and procedures around suicide care. I'm very excited to share with you that we stepped in with Shannon Otten and the Henderson County Public School System to implement a program called Sources of Strength. We identified funding through the Community Foundation of Henderson County and Department of Education, and we're able to bring this evidence-based work into our community. And so we've launched Sources of Strength both with North Hendersonville High School and Hendersonville Middle School. The commitment is that we'll be launching with all 7 schools, 5 high schools, 2 middle schools by the end of the school year. So 2 have launched, 3 are on their way, and then we'll have 2 by the end of the school year. And this is to train peer leaders within the school systems. Those peer leaders start to put out positive messaging, strengths-based messaging into the school system. So we identify adult advisors that lead the program, but the peer leaders are the ones that are telling us what they need to be doing in the school to connect on the strengths that the students want to build. And that's mental health, family support, mentors. So that the funding that we received was both to bring the program here, to have a crisis counselor, also to provide stipends for the adult advisors as they lift up the program. So some other strategies that we began taking a look at, this is all before the coalition began. We launched a Survivors of Suicide support group in February of 2025. We created a pamphlet and flyer for survivors of suicide loss that we're working with faith-based communities to put that out right now in hopes of transitioning that out with our law enforcement. We have held grief and loss workshops and partnering with our faith-based community when they have a loss to suicide. We've had public messaging campaigns where you've seen the yard signs out for both May as Mental Health Month, and then in September, a Safe September, so acknowledging National Recovery Month and also Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. We held our very first Henderson County Behavioral Health Conference in March of 2025, which was a huge success. It was sold out. We brought in 25 experts into Henderson County to talk about community approaches, evidence-based interventions, mental health and substance use, so that we can continue to bring that information to the people providing services. And then our coalition launched in April of 2025. So since then, we have really taken a look at our community health assessment, which prioritized mental health and suicide prevention as the #1 strategy that we need to look at, our priority for the county. From the community health assessment, we moved to the community health improvement plan. And so our coalition has been working on that community health improvement plan. So what are we going to look at? What does the coalition want to do? And how are we going to move that through over the next 3 years? So there are many components of the community health improvement plan that we've been thinking about. There have been about 150 people that have signed up to be a part of the coalition. We're meeting monthly. The first piece of that is that we're going to track the coalition itself, to meet monthly, to keep talking, to make sure that we're bringing not only our community partners to the table to talk about what services they have, but we're looking at policy and advocacy. So what do we see coming down from both a national and state level? And then part of that coalition is also a community engagement committee that's helping with the Henderson County Behavioral Health Coalition. We are scheduled to have our next coalition on the March 23rd, 2026. We already have our keynote speakers. Our call for speakers is currently out right now. The next strategy that is imperative for the coalition is that we look at sequential intercept model mapping. So the sequential intercept model is an evidence-based strategy that brings experts into communities, that looks at the intersection of the criminal justice, mental health, and substance use services and community. And in that, what it does is it maps at each intercept what services we have and the services that we need to think about moving forward. It is a strategy that really helps communities take a look at where should funding go, what should we be prioritizing, and how do we move that forward over the next few years. So think of it like a strategic plan in that intersection. We will be talking about that at our next coalition meeting VIA has stepped into providing sequential intercept mapping. So our goal is to work with VIA to have those experts come into Henderson County. We would love all of your support as we do that because we'll need the community's voice, law enforcement's voice to be a part of that mapping activity to make sure that we get everything that we need identified and put into the plan. We're also tracking sources of strength to ensure that our 7 schools are up and lifted and moving forward. We're going to continue to look at mental health and suicide prevention trainings, as we talked about before. And then the other strategies that the coalition is looking at, when we met to talk about the CHIP, we really acknowledged all of the great work that is currently happening in Henderson County and how much more over the next year do we want to focus on and move forward. So the strategies that we're looking at and we're determining that we want to watch for the next year are the law enforcement deflection program through Hendersonville Police Department. That is a fantastic co-responder model that we're really interested in watching how that evolves and moves forward. We're looking at Part E launching the Adolescent Behavioral Health Unit in early 2026. We're watching Advent's Adolescent Intensive Outpatient Program that has launched. We're also going to be looking at the suicide postvention strategies and how we can move the needle in caring for people that have lost a loved one to suicide. We want to keep our eyes on care transitions. We have a grant that's currently under review right now that we're keeping our fingers crossed gets funded. If that comes to fruition, we'll be implementing care transitions with Party and Advent. We're watching the community paramedic as it begins to launch, and then continuing those safe messaging strategies in May and September as components of the community health improvement plan. So other strategies that we are looking at, I think John passed out to all of you, there's a sheet. So we prioritized, we looked at the national strategy for suicide prevention and all of the recommendations that were in that strategy. And then we also took a look at North Carolina's strategic plan for 5 years on what they're prioritizing. Because as we want to take a look at what we want to do here, some of the funding opportunities that are coming down through the state are going to be really aligned with their national or their state strategy. So we had our work group prioritize what they were interested in. And as you'll see in the top 6 of those were 1, to develop a countywide behavioral health plan that aligns with that sequential intercept model mapping, that we start a suicide prevention work group. So a small dedicated work group that's just focused on suicide prevention strategies, that we do more targeted public awareness messaging on crisis to care. So how do people in a crisis get the care that they need and making sure that they know where to find the resources when they need them. We also are looking at a behavioral health urgent care as a priority. I heard earlier that the Behavioral Health Coalition also identified that a Henderson County Senior Center is a critical next step. And then also third spaces for behavioral health. And this is where can people access behavioral health beyond traditional services. And then 2 other strategies that I'm personally looking at in the world of suicidology is a program called Man Therapy. One of the things that we look at in most communities is that the number 1 sector that we're losing to suicide are older men. And so how do we identify, link them to the help that they need and have it more normalized that men can reach out and get help. And Man Therapy is a way to do that. And so it's putting up billboards, having certified man therapists. It's a fantastic website. If you haven't taken a look at it, there's a lot of humor behind it. So look at that website. And then LOSS teams. And LOSS teams stand for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors. And this is a national implementation program where we work with law enforcement to have people that have lost someone to suicide help others that have lost someone to suicide. And part of our support group is in hopes that we find people who are willing to help others down the road and implement a LOSS team here in Henderson County. So these are all the things that the coalition is beginning to work on and think about and strategize. Any questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Melissa.
Get into our business. Does anyone want to stay for the business portion? You are free to proceed. We're going to move into our public hearings. Got to turn that on, sorry. First is a rezoning, a standard rezoning, and small area rezoning.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. It's good to see you all this evening. If you will allow me, I'm going to front load this presentation a little bit different than our typical rezoning, standard rezoning. It's a bit unique. We have applicants, Daniel Huggins, Haley Lamoureux, that have submitted a petition for standard rezoning for their property at 824 Suite 400 on Locust Street. This is the last building, if you can kind of picture that block to the northwest in the row of buildings that are on Locust Street between Lynn Street and 8th Avenue. And this application is serving as a catalyst for a small area rezoning for the surrounding properties, all of these are zoned I-1. So staff is proposing that each of these properties be rezoned to CMU. You may recall we had nearly an identical situation last November, just one block over, closer to 7th Avenue, and actually fronting on 7th Avenue. The Track Street to 7th Avenue, Maple Street to Locust was rezoned from C2 to CMU. And in that case, we had a single applicant that initiated the rezoning and then a staff recommendation that the entire block be rezoned so that there would be conformity and to align with the comprehensive plan and the changing conditions in the 7th Avenue district. The long-held prevailing opinion amongst city planning staff, as well as the vision that's reflected in the city's adopted plan, is that the 7th Avenue district should not be zoned I-1 or C2, but should rather be zoned to an urban mixed-use district similar to that which is found in and around Main Street. So we had an identical situation where best practice would be for the city to pursue a small area rezoning, to modernize the development standards and align the zoning with the emerging revitalization trends in this area. But what makes this situation unique is right after last November came December, when the North Carolina General Assembly passed Senate Bill 382 that stripped the authority of municipalities to rezone properties in certain situations without owners' consent. So this proposed small area rezoning is one of those situations. This is based on the basic fact that the current zoning of I-1 allows more permitted uses than are permitted under CMU. So the difference in the total number of permitted uses is really the sole determining factor that's making this a downzoning, which requires property owners' consent. Now, there are several other factors about this situation that would suggest that rezoning to CMU would in reality be far more favorable to the property owners than the current I-1 zoning. But those other considerations are not part of the new downzoning law, and they cannot be given consideration. So as such, we invited the neighboring property owners to give consent to the rezoning and to take advantage of this opportunity, with the application fees being waived. To date, in addition to the original applicants, we have 3 property owners that have consented to participate in this round of rezoning. And then we also opened it up for the following month's planning board, which will be coming up next week, for other properties to participate for 1 additional month. And we have 3 additional properties that will be presented to planning board next week, for a total of 7 out of the 9 that were engaged to participate and in the rezoning. So to achieve these outcomes, starting in early August, staff developed a communication plan once we received the application, and we began engaging with all the property owners using multiple formats for communication, including hosting a meeting, an in-person meeting for them on August 26th. This meeting was well attended by all the property owners, and all the information was clearly communicated in both verbal and written form. And despite significant displays of skepticism and distrust towards staff, staff did work together as a team really well to convey all of the facts as clearly as possible and to build trust with these owners. And so a summary of the key points that were conveyed to the property owners included that all the existing businesses and uses of the properties in this area would still be allowed under CMU. So no change, no impact to the existing businesses. I-1 allows other uses that CMU does not, Many of those uses would be incompatible with this area. So there's the potential for negative impacts from potentially permissible uses such as video gambling, storage yards, body shops, outdoor storage, treatment plants, concrete plants, et cetera. Those are all allowed by right under I-1. CMU allows other uses that I-1 does not, that would be considered more in line with the prevailing market trends. And these uses complement and conform with the emerging identity of the district. So you would have potentially new economic opportunities that would be gained under CMU with new uses such as multifamily residential, which has no density cap, music and art studios, professional office, et cetera. The fourth point was that taxes would not be impacted. Each of these properties as I-1 with commercial uses in them are already taxed at the highest rate. So, and that's all been confirmed with the county tax assessor's office. Number 5, the existing buildings are non-conforming, meaning if substantially damaged, they could not be rebuilt without meeting the I-1 setbacks, 30 feet setback from the front, 20 feet on each side, and 20 from the rear. Most of these buildings have 0 setbacks. So additionally, these properties do not meet the minimum lot size. Minimum lot size under I-1 is 40,000. It's about 40,000 square feet, which is roughly an acre. The average lot size of parcels along Locust Street is under 11,000 square feet, with the smallest parcel being 3,000 square feet. And then any new additions to these buildings would also have to meet those I-1 setbacks. And then number 6, that CMU setbacks would make these buildings go from non-conforming to legally conforming. So they would no longer be subject to the non-conforming standards. And this would allow for the maximum use of the property and to help protect the existing character of this district that I think is pretty well loved. So that's my introduction. Some photos of the site. On the corner, the Coca-Cola with the mural is the applicant. That's the subject property of the applicant. The upper right photo is of a consenting property, Dennis Dunlap's property that is home to Guidon Brewing. The bottom left is just the other end of the block. And many of those properties will eventually be coming before you for the rezoning. And then the bottom right is also a consenting this round. It's a vacant property behind the Coca-Cola building. The subject property is designated as downtown in the Gen H comprehensive future land use map. And these parcels, which are outlined in red, you can kind of see in the upper right, were included in the downtown master plan study area, and they were designated within what was called the 7th Avenue area. And that master plan included a focus area for 7th Avenue, conceptual future growth scenario of all the buildings in this proposed rezoning area. They are all proposed, they're all shown in gray, which means they're proposed to remain and be preserved. The only new buildings that are shown in this conceptual plan would be those on the vacant parcel behind Miller's Linen Services, which in this case shows townhomes, kind of transitioning from the commercial towards the single family residential as you continue north. This would be allowed under CMU. It would not be allowed under I-1. Continuing to look at the comprehensive plan consistency, staff found that the proposed zoning to CMU is consistent with the character area description for downtown. In taking a look at compatibility, the subject properties and proposed properties are all in the corporate limits of the city of Hendersonville, zoned I-1. CMU is just across the street and continues south towards Main Street. The properties are located in the 7th Avenue Municipal Service District, the MSD. They are situated in a historic part of town located between the 7th Avenue Depot National Register Historic District and the Cold Springs Park National Register Historic District. The principal properties primarily contain 2 to 3 story brick buildings that were originally constructed in 1926 as part of a Coca-Cola plant. These other properties, which have also consented to the rezoning, contain retail and microbrewery and one which is vacant. The land uses in this area are typical of an area that's transitioning from a mid-century railroad-oriented industrial district to a revitalized urban mixed-use node. The evolving character of the area has developed over the last 15 years with a variety of public and private investments. The future economic opportunities for this area better align with the uses and standards that are permitted under CMU. And then just to quickly kind of summarize compatibility, it is highlighted by the fact that staff reviewed the Gen H goals and guiding principles comparing these two zoning districts and found that I-1 was inconsistent with 8 of the 10 Gen H goals, while CMU was consistent or somewhat consistent with all 10. Similarly, I-1 was inconsistent with all 7 of the Gen H guiding principles, and CMU was consistent with all 7 guiding principles. So a real dichotomy. And, part of the reasoning for that is, relates to the, how this does not, the current form of the buildings are non-conforming. They don't align with I-1, and that I-1 does not have any types of design standards where CMU does. I mentioned that it was the area was included in the downtown master plan, but since there's no new development, staff did not do a full analysis of how it aligns with the design guidelines. For the third criteria, changed conditions, staff found that the changed conditions related to the fact that the 7th Avenue district, including Locust Street, has been a very rapidly changing area in Hendersonville over the last 15 years. Both public and private investments have stabilized and celebrated the existing historical integrity of the district and provided new life in the form of public infrastructure and a vibrant economic opportunity. The former industrial roots of the buildings along Locust Street are evolving to house a mix of uses that serves a variety of urban needs and appetites. Recent updates to the I-1 zoning district standards requires that the areas of the city that are no longer functioning as industrial districts update their zoning designation to accommodate appropriate and compatible uses and dimensional standards, and this rezoning would accomplish that. In terms of public interest, the range of positive impacts for the community have been documented throughout this presentation. The properties would continue to be served by public facilities, and there is no impact on the directly associated with impacts to the natural environment with this rezoning. So planning board considered this at their last meeting, reviewed the proposal, and unanimously recommended the comprehensive plan consistency statement shown on the screen, and they put forth a recommendation for the list of rationale for approval. I will note that the last one, number 4, is specifically addressing questions related to spot zoning. That concern is ultimately going to be resolved with the inclusion of multiple property owners coming on board with this. But when we were writing the motion, there was only a couple of folks that were involved. So now we're up to 7, as mentioned. And then we have rationale for denial, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. I did pass out an updated cover sheet, which has a correction to a PIN number. So want to make sure that any motion read there is coming from that sheet.
Any questions for Mr. Manley?
Thank you.
Okay. Would the applicants like to add anything to the presentation?
Hi, council. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm Daniel Huggins, and this is my wife, Haley Lamoureux. I'm a Hendersonville native, and Haley is a Main Street downtown business owner for 21 years. Our kids attend Hendersonville city schools. The oldest just graduated a 5th generation Bearcat, and she's off at school for architecture. We're here today to ask that the property at 824 Locust Street be rezoned from I-1 to CMU. When we purchased the property in February of 2025, it's industrial 1 zoning aligned with our plans. In May, there was a text amendment that removed a specific usage for the property. The building's historic character, location, and potential drew us to it years ago when we were dropping our kids off at Bruce Drysdale. We were finally able to purchase the building with the goal of converting it to a mixed-use space. Our plan is to restore the facade and to preserve its historical significance. We're excited to see the revitalization of the Seventh Avenue area, and we want to be a part of it. We've done restorations on numerous properties in Hendersonville, including our building on Main Street, where our business is located and with a residential unit above. We think the CMU designation will better reflect the recent changes in the area and better connect the historic Cold Springs neighborhood and Hyman Heights to 7th Avenue and Main Street. We believe having a full-time occupancy that is well lit and maintained will make the area safer and more walkable and better fits with the neighborhood, the elementary school, and the church and other businesses. In the last 25 years, the building has been more or less vacant and it's suffered vandalism and neglect. Renovating it will improve property values and help to promote economic growth in the area and is more in line with the city's comprehensive plan. We ask that the city approve the zoning change. This is a chance to move into the present with a vibrant, economically resilient future, aligning with the city's long-term goals. Thanks for your time and consideration. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Huggins. Okay, anyone have questions for him? No, all right. Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor, it has.
We'll open this public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak? Is there anyone online seeking recognition to speak?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, in that case, we'll close that public hearing. Council, discussion, motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council adopt an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the City of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of properties possessing pins 9569-80-2471 and 9569-80-4238 and 9569-80-3335 and 9569-80-2395 from I-1 Industrial Zoning District to CMU Central Mixed Use Zoning District based on the following. The petition is found to be consistent with the City of Hendersonville Gen H comprehensive plan based on the information from staff analysis, and the proposed zoning of CMU aligns with the Gen H 2045 comprehensive future land use and conservation map and the character area for downtown. Furthermore, we find this petition to be reasonable and in the public interest based on the following. The CMU zoning is more compatible than I-1 zoning due to the differences in dimensional standards and permitted uses. CMU zoning better protects the existing character of the built environment and supports recent reinvestment in the economic vitality of 7th Avenue District. CMU zoning will protect against incompatible industrial uses. Also, other neighboring properties zoned I-1 were provided with an opportunity to rezone their properties to CMU to avoid any appearance of spot zoning and to create cohesive zoning district. However, due to the new requirement under SB 382, property owners must provide their consent for a rezoning of this nature. Though adjacent property owners were provided the information and opportunity to consent to rezoning, only those included in this motion have consented.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the rezoning on Locust Street, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it. Taken care of. Thank you. Okay, second public hearing is a zoning text amendment, CMU lot size and on-street parking.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity here. This is a zoning text amendment that was applied for by Watermark Landscape Architects to address a couple of tweaks to the CMU zoning district standards, specifically to address the minimum lot size, a reduction in minimum lot size, and to allow for on-street parking to count towards meeting the minimum parking requirements. So when we're talking about CMU, I just wanted an opportunity for everyone to be able to visualize the area of the city that we're talking about. I will note that in the upper right up here, portions of that at least are in the 7th Avenue MSD, which does not have parking requirements. So when we're talking about changes to the on-street parking, it wouldn't necessarily apply to that area, but it would to the rest of the CMU, which essentially surrounds the core Main Street area of the city. So going ahead and looking at the proposed language, the specific request that was made by the applicant was to simply just eliminate minimum lot size requirements and to allow on-street parking to count towards minimum parking requirements. Ultimately, the language that's going to be presented to you was put together by staff to achieve the intended outcomes of the applicant in a reasonable and effective way. So the first item here shown in green is just to introduce on-street parking in the language. And then the language that is shown in red as being struck through is actually just being relocated to a different section in this same portion of the ordinance. The abundance of the new language is found here, and it goes as follows. On-street parking would be allowed, but it may not exceed 33% of a development's total parking requirement. Only eligible on-street parking spaces may be utilized to meet parking requirements to be eligible. And an on-street parking space must either be an existing delineated parking space. So if there's some out there now that are right along the frontage of the property, then those can count. Or they can, as part of a new development, newly delineate on-street parking spaces as long as it's done in accordance with MUTCD standards. Yes.
Where did the 33% number come from?
I would say that what we, an analysis was done to kind of look at a typical block in this area. Best case scenario, how many parking spaces could you get in a block? Which is really going to be kind of unrealistic because you have things like fire hydrants and utilities and driveway curb cuts, and that you got to keep those clear. So the number of potential parking spaces is really going to be pretty small. But when you have smaller types of development, say maybe you had a 10-unit townhome development and they on a corner, and they're able to put, in theory, they could be putting a good bit of their parking just using existing parking that's already there, on-street parking that's already there. And so to try to prevent a smaller project from placing too much of a burden on existing spaces, that was included. And I think that number could be moved up and down. But if you think about a larger, if you start going up multi-story type of apartment development, that, the on-street parking is going to be just such a tiny fraction of what they would be able to do. So it really depends on scale, but that was the thought. I've got the MUTCD standards here that show, you got an 8 by 22 foot parking spaces and the amount of spacing from intersections and all of those good details. Yeah, there was a couple other things that I didn't mention that were that the parking spaces that we're requiring that they be shown on the site plan, and that they're the responsibility of the developer to install those. This is the language that was struck from the initial slide that we looked at. It's been replaced over here, which was reorganized under a new subheading for off-street parking because it pertains specifically to off-street parking. And I'm going to skip ahead to Article 6, which has provisions, our general provisions for all of our parking. And we made some tweaks here that make sure that everything's clear and aligned with any of the changes that are in CMU. And then we also just added this note that if you're delineating on-street parking, it's got to be shown in the site plan. And so that's all of the changes related to parking. This table is the sum of the changes related to minimum lot size. This is a reduction from 8,000, which is the current standard, to 0. CMU is actually the only mixed-use district. You think about CHMU, Greenville Highway mixed use, or highway mixed use, urban residential, none of those have a minimum lot size. So this is the only mixed-use district that had a minimum lot size. So this aligns it with our other mixed use. And the big allowance here is really, in my mind, that I've identified is around townhomes. Townhomes are subdivided as and considered lots, but they're just the footprint of a building. So 8,000 square feet is going to be a really big townhome. So this would essentially allow, and townhomes are appropriate in this area surrounding downtown. So we're really allowing townhomes in a way with this change. So that's why that's important. Staff, in looking at the comprehensive plan, staff found that it was consistent with the character area description for downtown. I'm not going to read that to you, but it says what you would think it would say about downtown. The CMU district is also represents a large portion of the downtown master plan study area from chapter 5 of the Gen H plan. In this master plan, there are a series of design guidelines. One of the really key, foundational components of the design guidelines is street typologies. So this section is important because each design recommendation for the site and the buildings is based on the street type or the type of street on which the property fronts. And so it's really foundational. As it pertains to this text amendment, I wanted to point out that the most prevalent street typology is downtown street type, and that's shown on the right here. And it prominently features delineated on-street parking on both sides of the street. And that is where sufficient right-of-way allows for it to be on both sides of the street. I want to point that out. Continuing on with the downtown master plan, the proposed changes are consistent with the focus areas, the conceptual build outs that are shown for the downtown edge area and the 7th Avenue area, as well as the recommendations for public realm, with on-street parking being a really important component of the public realm, and with site design considerations which aim to minimize surface level parking lots. And for the second criteria for compatibility, staff reviewed the proposed changes, looking at existing conditions and the goals and guiding principles of the comp plan, and found that the proposed amendment is compatible given the nature of the urban core of the city and how these proposed changes align with those goals and guiding principles. And for the third criteria, text amendment is in response to a demand to maximize the utilization of developable land in the city's core. And for public interest, the changes to minimum lot size would allow for compatible infill development. As I mentioned, the townhome option. And additionally, the use of on-street parking may increase, will increase on existing on-street parking spaces. But the hope is that the proposal also allows for and will hopefully or likely result in the delineation of new on-street parking spaces as well. Staff found that the proposed text amendments have the potential to allow for greater utilization of existing infrastructure with the creation of infill development that relates to public facilities, and that there's no specific environmental impacts associated with this text amendment. The planning board reviewed this and unanimously supported it at their meeting in September. They've put forth the comprehensive plan consistency statement on the screen, as well as these rationale for approval, and staff has provided rationale for denial as well for your consideration. And I'll take any questions. They are not present this evening. They did attend planning board.
Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised?
Yes, Mayor, it has.
We will open this public hearing. Is anyone present wish to comment on this zoning text amendment? Is there anyone online seeking recognition?
Yes, Madam Mayor, one hand is raised.
Okay, you would call on them, please?
Ken Fitch, you are unmuted.
Ken Fitch, 1046 Patton Street. It is important to recognize that this is an applicant-generated text amendment and would facilitate the realization of a specific project or projects. But as a text amendment, this would also impact other project possibilities, but also impact the functioning of many areas of the city in ways we may not yet know. The CMU includes many diverse road and neighborhood situations with both thoroughfares and narrow streets, some characteristic of an era we would term historic. Some may even follow the routes used by horse-drawn wagons on their way to market. There are locations where this may be fine, but others where there will be issues that would defy solution. Consider the situation with the new courthouse. In the original design, in the early stage of approval, there was a multi-story garage to address the critical need for parking. However, when the cost for the project was presented to the Board of Commissioners for their approval, the commissioners were somewhat stunned, and designers were asked to provide a lower budget design, with the result that the multi-story garage was eliminated from the plan, leaving future parking issues for later consideration. And this lower budget plan was adopted and then presented to you. As you may remember, Councilmember Simpson raised concerns with the parking issue and the reality of the actual parking need and the impact of inadequate parking in the surrounding area. This text amendment would have further impact on the traffic and parking situation in just that courthouse area. Further, we look at the potential parking issues with the acoustic trailhead issue. And indeed, there is an agenda item this evening addressing traffic issues in that area, and parking becomes a factor there also. And of course, you mentioned parking, the residual questions and issues abound. In some locations, will this on-street parking impact existing businesses? Do we have an existing high-quality street infrastructure to sustain this? And then we hear familiar rationales during this presentation. In EMU, we move people closer to amenities, we move people next to services. Well, that sounds wonderful, but the proximity does not exist in all areas of the CMU. Yes, we are a walkable city with a legendary walkable mayor, and we can take a hike to the grocery store, but carrying groceries back or lugging a grocery cart across those streets, good luck. You have to hustle. So that rationale, it's an idealization, but it may not be real in terms of our geography and our street. It is stated that CMU represents zoning for some of the most historic parts of the city. However, the density of development could alter the historic character of some areas that are critical assets for tourism promotion. It is not only Main Street that is historic, and tourism is significant to our economy. And the inevitable question, who is this housing for? Workforce? Workforce families typically have two wage earners and two cars. We could consider this topic ongoing for a while tonight, but we won't. Again, there are some areas where this might work and be viable, but others where issues would be overwhelming and negative in impact. Is a more site-specific assessment more reasonable? In this small town, does one size fit all? And ultimately, we may find ourselves at cross purposes here. With an increased density and the demand for overwhelmed street parking, we might be forced to demolish some buildings to provide a parking lot or a parking deck, which we're trying to avoid. This is a complicated issue, and to rush forward without site-specific assessments might be unwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. Is anyone else seeking recognition? No. All right, we'll close that public hearing. Council? Discussion or a motion? Well, no, we did the last one.
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt an ordinance amending the official City of Hendersonville zoning ordinance, Article 5, zoning district classifications, Article 6, general provisions, and Article 7, development review to eliminate minimum lot size requirements and to allow qualifying on-street parking to count toward minimum parking requirements in the CMU zoning district based on the following. The petition is found to be consistent with the Gen H comprehensive plan based on the information from the staff analysis and the public hearing. And because the proposed amendment aligns with the Gen H comprehensive plan future land use and conservation map and the character area descriptions, we find this petition in conjunction with the recommendations presented by staff to be reasonable and in the public interest based on information from the staff analysis and the public hearing. And because the proposed amendment creates an opportunity to accommodate infill development, the proposed amendment allows for greater utilization of existing infrastructure, and the proposed amendment increases opportunities for additional housing in the city core.
Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the zoning text amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, and that motion carries. Right. Thank you. And now, Mr. Hayes, conditional zoning district, complete kids.
Yes, good evening, everyone. So the city is in receipt of an application for a conditional rezoning known as Complete Kids. The two properties in question are located at 913 and 917 9th Avenue. The applicant is Catherine Thomas, who works for Care Partners, the parent company for Complete Kids. The property is owned by New Leaf Sales LLC. The current zoning is PID CZD, which is Planned Institutional Development Conditional Zoning District. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property to MIC CZD, or Medical Institutional and Cultural Conditional Zoning District. The subject properties are a combined 0.95 acres. The applicant is proposing to use the existing building, which I'll show you on the next slide, as the space to assist children with things such as physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. And the applicant is here so they can speak more to what they're planning on doing with the space if you have further questions on that. The current zoning of PID CZD only allows for the use of a child care center. So this went through the rezoning process a few years ago. And the only use assigned was childcare center. So they had to do a rezoning regardless for their use. They met with staff, and we ultimately decided what they were proposing was an office at the end of the day with our uses in our zoning ordinance. PID CZD does not allow for offices. So given the medical nature of what they are doing, we advise that they pursue MIC, which does allow for office, business, professional, and public as the use. So that ultimately is the use that they have requested and would be assigned to this conditional zoning district. So a few site photos. So this is the existing building, and they are not proposing to do any expansion of the building. They will do interior renovations. So ultimately, this CZD is really associated with the site, the parking lot, and the landscaping. Here you can see, if you're looking straight at the building off of 9th Avenue, this is to the right of the building. I'll talk a little bit more about this when I discuss the conditions that the applicant has proposed for this site. This is on the back side of the building. So this is an existing tree line, and the applicant is actually proposing to preserve most, if not all, of those trees that are there. And then this is looking off of Orleans to the building. And so that tree line is to the left of the image. And then you can see the building going towards 9th Avenue on the right. So here is a vicinity map. So some things in the immediate vicinity. You have Hendersonville Middle School right across the street from this property. And then off to the side, you have Hendersonville Elementary School. And then kind of to the north of the property, you have mostly single-family residential. So there was a neighborhood compatibility meeting on June 24th. There were 2 residents in person who attended and then 1 online. Items discussed included concerns related to traffic impacting the adjacent schools and residential area, questions pertaining to the number of employees who would be working in the facility, questions about the hours of operation of the facility and how it would impact school drop-off, and then questions pertaining to if a traffic study will be required for the project. So here we have the site plan for the project. The existing building is 11,441 square feet. And like I mentioned before, it will not be expanded or altered on the exterior, just the interior. They are required to provide 29 parking spaces. They provided 30 parking spaces. There is a one-way entrance off of Orleans to the kind of northwest of this site, and then there's a one-way exit onto 9th Avenue as well. And then the sidewalk currently is on 9th Avenue. They will expand it onto the Orleans side. The applicant has satisfied all of the landscaping requirements except for those addressed in one of their conditions that they proposed. And I'll get into those conditions. So the first condition, it says, this is an existing building. The developer requests to be granted relief from the 25-foot building setback to provide a 4-foot 8-inch setback on the rear property line and a 9-foot 8-inch setback on the north side property line to reduce the setback requirement in section 5-10-3 in the northeast corner. So this is a non-conforming structure currently as it sits. So ultimately this condition would make it a conforming structure. Would not really impact it other than if there was significant damage to the building, they could rebuild it to the current footprint without having any issues there. The second condition, the developer requests to reduce the buffer planting requirement in section 15-6 along the eastern side of the property, and a 5-foot height wood panel fence will be installed in all areas that cannot meet the size and planting requirements. So they are required to provide a buffer on both sides of the property, given that it abuts residential. So I have the image right there. So they have a very, very narrow side yard. It would not enable them to do their 10-foot buffer that they are required to do. So they're asking instead to install a fence along that side. And then they also are providing some of those plantings that would be required in the buffer on the other side of the drive, the left side of the drive. So and staff didn't have an issue with this condition when they proposed it. And then the final condition, the developer requests to utilize the peninsula planting area adjacent to the parking as the parking island size requirement. Anytime you get over 20 parking spaces, you have to provide parking islands. They are working on very narrow margins. They would lose several parking spaces, which would actually put them below the minimum required. So staff actually advised that they utilize these kind of jut outs on the edge of the parking as their parking islands. So, and they'll do all the plantings that are required for parking islands within those areas. So those are the 3 conditions. Like I said, staff had no concerns with any of those conditions. So the subject property and surrounding parcels are designated as multi-generational living on the future land use map. The character area is characterized by a mixed residential development and limited amounts of small-scale neighborhood serving commercial. And it's comprised of a variety of homes, mixing detached and attached units with lesser amounts of multifamily units. The combination of housing types are intended to create intergenerational neighborhoods. Improved open spaces in forms of greens, pocket parks, and neighborhood parks are interspersed. There's also a good amount of institutional, so the schools, as well as family neighborhood living in the immediate vicinity. And the subject parcel was excluded from the land supply map and suitability assessment analysis in the comprehensive plan. And staff ultimately found it to be somewhat consistent with the character area description. It was inconsistent with the zoning crosswalk in the comprehensive plan. And ultimately staff, and I think I'll touch on this a little later, but staff did find it to be consistent overall with the comprehensive plan. You know, these parts, the character area description, zoning crosswalk are just one component of that plan. So, you know, overall staff did find this to be consistent. The subject property is currently zoned PID CZD. The adjacent properties are zoned R15, and the property across 9th Avenue in Orleans is also zoned PID Hendersonville Middle School. And the uses surrounding the property are Hendersonville Middle School, as well as residential. There is a daycare that's located down 9th Avenue about a block. And then obviously the hospital is in the vicinity of this property as well. The subject property currently has one structure on it. The structure will be used by the applicant for their offices. No expansion of the structure is proposed, and the adjacent property that sits on the corner of 9th and Orleans Avenue will be incorporated into the plan as part of the parking lot. And then, like I mentioned before, there's a school across the street. So overall, you know, the use here is relatively compatible with the surrounding uses and neighborhood. And then thinking about changed conditions, the subject property was previously zoned to enable a childcare center. The venture never was realized, and therefore the applicant is proposing to change the zoning to suit their needs. Thinking about the public interest, the applicant will activate an unused building, thereby improving the safety of an area from unwanted activity in that building. This will also bring a vital service for families. The close proximity to schools in the area may create opportunities for children to utilize this service. The subject property will be served by city services. There's no major impact to the environment with this development. And then I've provided, the planning board approved this unanimously. This is their comprehensive plan consistency statement, as well as their rationale for approval. And then we have a draft rationale for denial. And I can answer any questions.
Any questions?
Sam, I have a question, and you may be able to answer it, or the applicant. I'd like to know their hours of operations and their point of entrance and exit.
Entrance and exit onto the site.
Onto the site, will it
Okay.
be, you know, will it be going 9th Avenue since we have the schools, or
Yes.
Orleans?
Yeah, so I'll answer that one, and then I think the applicant can speak to their hours of operation more than I can. So yeah, so entrance will be off of Orleans. Can I? Yeah, perfect. So yeah, so they'll have a one-way entrance up here, and then a one-way exit onto 9th Avenue.
Which would line up with the one-ways during drop-off and pickup time.
That's a concern. That was my concern.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think since they're doing it that way, then it helps alleviate some of the issues, because you're not going to have people trying to go against the school traffic to go into the exit.
And I will say, I think the applicant has been in contact with the middle school, and so I think they can speak a little bit more to what they have in the works for that.
Okay. Any other
Thank you.
questions? No? Okay. If the applicant would like to add anything to the presentation?
Hi, good evening. I'm Jennifer Lon. I'm the Regional Vice President of Real Estate and Facilities for Care Partners, my coworker Josh. We have been in touch with both schools and we have discussed that we can tweak our hours if need be to help with any traffic issues, but we did make that carpool to in fact address that issue when it was brought up. Just a little tidbit I thought was fun because we were sitting here tonight. I was hoping Mr. Moss would be here, but you mentioned in your proclamation that he worked at the Salisbury Post. We actually have a Complete Kids in the old Salisbury Post building in Salisbury. We own that, and Salisbury Post actually is still in there with us, so we still work closely with them. I thought it was just a fun thing to share. I was hoping to see him, but we are excited to come into Hendersonville. We love the process. It's been quite a learning curve, but educational and really nice to meet the people in Hendersonville. We really want to come in and be part of the community. It's been great working with the current owner there. And like I said, you know, we are here to make a difference in the community and to be part of the community. And we're happy to answer any questions you might have.
You had asked about the hours of operation. Yeah.
You want to answer that?
Sure. So our normal hours of operation is between 8 in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening. However, we've already been in touch with the school and we've already decided to stagger our start about 8:30, which would be after the drop off. And also our we do a staggered start, so we don't have like a line of carpools. We stagger starts, you know, every 15 or 20 minutes because we don't want a lot of activity going on in the front for the parents. So it's not like a typical carpool or carpool line. So we don't have any issue with it, and we're always in downtown areas next to schools, and so we're well aware of you know, how to accommodate that as well.
And that won't pose a conflict with the child care center down the street either because of the hours. That was small my concern.
We don't have line, like Josh said, we really don't have lines of carpool. In one of my past lives, I was a preschool director, so I understand those lines of carpools onto the street. We don't have that. It's not like that. Like Josh said, working with this type of population, we really try to minimize that kind of chaos and a lot of activity in one space for them. So we're very conscious about it. And knowing the school and the daycare's hours, we will work consciously to ensure that it doesn't impact that.
Okay.
Busiest times tend to be around 10 to 10:30 a.m. and then 1 to 1:30 p.m.
So will you be partnering with Party with UNC Blue? If they have a behavioral center down the street office at 712 Fleming Street. So will some of your clients be part of that, or will we be working together? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Great.
thank you so much. Okay, Madam Clerk, has this public hearing been advertised in accordance with general statutes?
Yes, Mayor, it has.
We will open this public hearing. Is there anyone present who wishes to speak to this rezoning? Is there anyone online who wishes to speak?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
Ken Fitch, you are unmuted.
Ken Fitch, 1046. During the neighborhood compatibility meeting and the subsequent planning board meeting, the discussions were extensive and detailed regarding this unique program with its various modes of therapy, counseling, and treatment that would be located here, and also how this building and site plan would function. During this process, the applicant has striven to ensure and establish compatibility in its use, functionality, and operations with the adjoining residential and institutional uses, including special attention to coordination with the existing traffic situations at this location, specifically with the schools, as you have just heard. This is conditional zoning, and the request is for a specific use, and the applicant has identified that as pediatric therapy. And I feel that it is essential that it be stated as such, as a pediatric medical office or pediatric therapy is stated in the motion statement and the ordinance amendment text as such. In the current form, the proposed motion and ordinance amendment text state the permitted uses as office, business, professional, and public. The concern here is for the future. If this project should be greeted with great success, for example, and the program decides to relocate to a larger venue, subsequent tenants that could be included in the category of permitted uses of offices, business, professional, and public might be incompatible, inappropriate, and dysfunctional in use and function at this location. The staff summary stated a proposed use medical office. However, even this use might be open to incompatibility, as a medical office designation might be construed to include behavioral health or drug treatment programs or mental health programs. These are all very important areas of treatment, as we heard earlier with the behavioral health program that they're initiating. But these might be inappropriate at this location with its intensive adjacent educational institutions and their functioning. And the specific vehicle and pedestrian corridors present a host of issues that this project is making an effort to address. Because this is a site where issues of access and egress are problematic during the day, as we all know, and this program has presented such a plan. So I would suggest that the permitted use in the motion and the ordinance amendment be stated as pediatric medical office or pediatric therapy facility, or with a condition that specifically defines the use of this specific important program. This is conditional zoning, and we should use that condition to define what will occur here, because this is otherwise a problematic site and location. Just one further point. It may be important for the record, publicly state the jurisdiction responsible for the licensing and accreditation of this program and the participants on the site, whether it be local, county, or state jurisdiction, so that that's clear from the start. But otherwise, this is obviously an ambitious, unique program and worthy of serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fitch. Is anyone else seeking recognition?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll close that public hearing. Council?
What do we think about changing the permitted use to something more specific?
So if it changed owners, right?
Mhm.
It would change the permitted use of the.
I'll let Community Development Director or Sam respond to that proposal as it
We
relates.
don't specifically have that use, that pediatric.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a use that's listed in our zoning ordinance, so it's not defined and not included. We wouldn't introduce a new use to a zoning district. That's one of the reasons we're doing MIC rather than EID, where we don't typically, without a zoning text amendment that introduces a new use, bring a new use into a zoning district. So the specific reference to, and I apologize to Mr. Fitch, I think it was pediatric services or therapy office use. We just don't have anything along those lines. We do have other uses that are reflective of maybe some of the concerns that he expressed, that if a different kind of use were to be proposed for the location, it might not automatically be a business or professional office use. That is certainly a use that could accommodate a wider spectrum of uses than just what's being proposed. It could you could have a business or professional office that might be a doctor or something along those lines, or, an accountant. But, I think some of what Mr. Fitch was referencing was maybe higher level of service provision, in which case those might fall into some of our, day center uses and other things, in which case they wouldn't be permitted without a change to the CZD to be allowed to occupy the space without further change.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, I move City Council adopt an ordinance amending the official zoning map of the city of Hendersonville, changing the zoning designation of the subject property. Pins 9569-40-2580 and 9569-40-3593 from PID-CZD, Plan Institutional Development Conditional Zoning District, to MIC CZD, Medical Institution and Cultural Condition Zoning District, based on the site plan dated September 22nd, 2025, and a list of conditions submitted by and agreed to by the applicant and presented at this meeting subject to the following. Development shall be consistent with the site plan, including the list of applicable conditions contained therein, permitted use, and the following permitted use: office, business, professional, and public. Permitted use and applicant the petition is found to be consistent with the City of Hendersonville Gen H 2045 comprehensive plan based on the information from the staff analysis, and because the petition is consistent with the range of goals, guiding principles, and the future land use designation as defined in Chapter 4 of the Gen H comprehensive plan. We find this petition to be reasonable and in the public interest based on the information from the staff analysis, public hearing, and because the petition utilizes an existing building and existing infrastructure. The petition is in close proximity to schools, medical facilities, and existing neighborhoods, making it an ideal location for the services offered. The petition will improve pedestrian connectivity in the area.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? If not, those in favor of the conditional zoning district, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it, motion carries, and that is approved.
Yeah.
Break.
Yes.
Okay, have a request for about a 5-minute break before we start on new business. discussing favorite snack foods. We can get. And I shall get back to the agenda. New business, 2025 GEO bond resolution of intent and statement of fact.
Mayor.
Mr. Murr, and were you one of the ones that went over the wall or down the?
Over the wall?
No, who was it? Chief did. Who else did?
No, I don't like heights.
You didn't do that one.
Chief is
Okay.
very brave.
There were several people.
Yeah. If I was on the Wizard of Oz, I'd
Okay.
be the lion. So, Mayor and Council, good evening. This evening before you, you have two resolutions that represent the first step in pursuing our $10 million general obligation bond referendum to support transportation improvements. The purpose of the bond is to provide funding for projects that will include sidewalk and ADA accessibility upgrades required by PROAG, related improvements such as curbs, gutters, drainage, complete streets projects, and most notably fixing the damn streets. The first resolution directs the publication of our notice of intent to apply to the local government commission for the bond approval. The second resolution makes factual findings required by state law and authorizes our finance director, Crystal Powell, to file an application with the local government commission. These findings confirm the necessity of the proposed financing, the reasonableness of the amount we intend to issue, and that the city's financial and debt management practices meet requirements. If the resolutions are adopted tonight, the next steps include publishing the notice of intent in the newspaper on October 7th, filing our application with the LGC in mid-October, and introducing the formal bond order in November and setting a public hearing date tentatively December 4th, 2025. Setting the referendum for March 3rd, 2026, at which point the city voters will decide whether to authorize the issuance. Following a successful referendum, the city would proceed to the LGC for final approval before any debt is issued. And tonight's actions do not issue the debt. They simply begin the formal process that is required of us to issue the debt down the road. Are there any questions I can help with?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Council?
Madam Mayor, I move the City Council adopt 1, the resolution directing the publication of the notice of intent to apply for the local government commission, and 2, the resolution making certain statements of fact as presented.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not. Those in favor of the motion moving forward with the GEO bonds, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, motion carries, and can take the first steps that we need to do that. Okay. Next is a request for NCDOT to reduce Church Street and King Street speed limits. And Mr. Detweiler.
Madam Mayor, Council, good evening. And again, I'm here as part of a request for NCDOT to reduce Church Street and King Street speed limits. And I know what you're thinking. What is Detweiler talking about? The speed limit is 20. Chief, we're going to reduce it to 10. What are we thinking about? So this is obviously a sign at on South Church Street or on Church Street at Church and Barnwell. It's 20 miles an hour there. It was brought to our attention at the Rail to Trail Advisory Committee meeting last month that there's actually a section of Church Street that is posted at 35 miles an hour, and it just so happens to be directly north of the Acoustic Trail crossing. So we kind of started, I kind of took a step back and kind of looked at some of the DOT mapping, and it just so happens that from NCDOT standpoint, a lot of their data actually shows that the speed limit on all of Church Street is 35 miles an hour. We know it's not posted that way. And a little chunk there at the north end of North King Street is posted at 35. The rest of is, according to DOT's records, 35 miles an hour. So basically, we're kind of asking to, you all have heard, I've heard, we've had a bunch of staff that have heard that there are some safety concerns with the Acosta Trail and some of the road crossings, this being one of them at Church Street. And so that's basically why we're asking for you all to issue a resolution to, or approve a resolution so we can get it to DOT so they can reduce the speed limit in that section of Church Street. And I went ahead and threw in a couple of slides because this has been, actually came up at least one of the council conversations so far, is, you know, with the safety concerns, possible safety concerns at the trail crossings, you know, what's going on with that? You know, can it be more safe? Just wanted to point out, I think John might have mentioned this at one of the council conversations, that not all of the safety improvements are in yet. So this is a screenshot from the Acosta Trail plans. And that is north is going off in my direction this way for you all. But this is from Cayuga going down toward the trail. And so you can see here that there is supposed to be some striping and some point out kind of in here. So where you have some of these drive entrances coming out, they're going to provide some striping here to really designate that there's only 2 through lanes there, so they don't look like, you know, 16-foot, 18-foot lanes. And then this is a continuation, you know, this is north up here. And, you know, you can see here that they basically neck down the 2 lanes to 12 feet. And these are pavement markings. So the lines represent pavement markings, and these dots here, they're a little hard to see. I zoomed in on this area. So those represent the flexible delineators, which are what we put in on South Main Street a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago. And so those will be there to kind of further designate that these are travel lanes so people aren't kind of wandering all over the place. And, you know, when the lanes are wider, people have a tendency to drive faster. So hopefully that will help slow people down. In addition, a little hard to see, but press the wrong button. Up here, it's kind of cut off, but there is a trail ahead pavement marking that's on here. This is the old a railroad crossing that is going to be removed, and it's going to be replaced with a trail. I believe it's trail ahead on the pavement to kind of further let folks know that there is a trail coming up. And
Brent, do you know the timeline of when these additional markings will be done?
so I'm glad you asked. So they were bid as part of the Acosta Trail project, but obviously that's DOT kind of ran that project. They ran the construction of that project. They are also, as you know, paving Church Street. And so they've decided to not have the Acosta Trail go in with all of those pavement improvements, or, you know, striping and lettering on the pavement, and then just have it milled down and done again. So they've decided to coordinate that and do it with the paving project. So as of 2 evenings ago, we got an update from a DOT resident engineer that resident engineer, that the milling subcontractor for the general contractor may start the second week of October. I can further clarify if that means next week or the following week. There is an option for that general contractor to self-perform the milling work, and that's about all we know right now. The original expiration date on that contract was, or is, October 17th. So it's not likely that they can, very unlikely that they can get it done in that period of time. But as soon as we get some updated dates, we'll know that for sure. It does make it a challenge to get all of this stuff done if you've got to mill and pave.
So I know we've been going back and forth in emails
Mhm.
about this topic. And I went ahead and scrolled back through all the communications that you've had with DOT. And it kind of feels like we get one excuse after one excuse after we don't really know. There's very little adequate communication between the contractor. The contractor has been supposed to start for the last 8 weeks. So what recourse do we have when they don't meet their contract deadline? And so when I serve on the MPO board, right, we have these contractors who bid projects. They have no capacity to do the projects. They're substantially delayed in the projects. Highland Lake is a good example of that. And then they continue to get paid for the contracts, and then they get to rebid another project. So from what I understand, there's very little accountability on these contractors who do this over and over and over. So what can we do about it? Because it's very frustrating. It's a major safety issue. They were literally going to start the project 2 days before the Apple Festival. That was their great plan, right? And so I don't understand what we can do, because I'm tired of their excuses. Like, really.
It is frustrating. And from our standpoint, I mean, you all have been around for our, the projects that we manage. We do not, we have great relationships with the contractors that we work with, but we hold them to deadlines. And we are not afraid to, there are these things in the contract called liquidated damages. So if contractors do not meet their deadlines, or their final completion date that's established in the contract that they signed, you can assess liquidated damages. DOT has provisions in their contracts to do that as well. And I don't know, I can't speak for their staff as to, I'm used to dealing with Division 14. I don't know if every division is like that. I don't know if it's a statewide thing. So definitely it's something that we can reach out to the division engineer and ask questions like that. But I don't know if from a state level, the state dissuades any of their divisions from, assessing liquidated damages or really enforcing these projects, because I understand the frustration.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, it's just DOT. It's just DOT.
Maybe we should go to Raleigh and have conversations there about folks not performing their contracts and, and still getting paid, and then still getting to turn around and bid for another project right after. If we did that kind of business here locally, no one would ever hire you again, and you would never be able to bid on a contract again. And they continue to get to do it.
Yeah, I mean,
And then
when
you
we
have to
bid
fight with them to
projects,
get the last 3% of their project done, i.e. the roundabout on Greenville Highway. 97% for 2 years.
mhm.
Okay, well, I'm off my soapbox now, but not happy.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Any other questions, comments? One thing I did want to point out real quick, sorry. I had this at the beginning. So again, this is DOT's mapping. I don't know what this means exactly. I would like to, as part of what we send along to them, I am going to ask them to kind of clean up their mapping. You can see these red, some of these little state SR numbered roads that they own are red. And if you look over here, those are 55. I verified that. I was sitting over there and I verified, I'm like, that can't be right. And then I start to look at it and yeah, they're, this section of 64 is shown as 55 west of Blythe. I don't know why it's shown up that way. So they need to clean up their data and clean up their maps, but it's probably important to have that stuff be consistent and have it be consistent with the speed limits that are posted. So one thing that I did want to point out, and this was brought up earlier, I think it was a public comment, is the fact that we are, I haven't verified this, but the fact that we do have so many pedestrian crashes here, and we're very high up per capita for fatalities and serious crashes, pedestrian and bike crashes. One thing that is important is to kind of right size your road, your speed limit for vehicles on roads that have pedestrian infrastructure. We actually did that a few years ago with 191, many years ago with 191 when we added sidewalks there. I believe most of 191 was 45 at the time, and you all, we did something very similar to this, and we asked DOT to reduce the speed limit to 35 and to have the sidewalk, you know, it's safe, but it's still, you know, right next to traffic. So you certainly don't want to have folks traveling any faster than 35 on that road. We are under design. Actually, DOT is actually designing South Grove Street sidewalks. And one thing that I do want to note is the posted speed limit there is 35. And, you know, there are quite a few curves and everything on that road. So once we get the sidewalks in on that whole thing, we might come back to you with a recommendation to look at reducing the speed limit there with, you know, chief and other staff's recommendations as well.
More questions or comments? Okay, have a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move council to request the North Carolina Department of Transportation reduce the speed limit from 35 miles per hour to 20 miles per hour on Church Street and King Street. Replace signs as necessary to reflect the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit and update records, maps, and data accordingly.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not? Those in favor of the request to DOT, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Motion carries, and send them the letter or whatever you have to do. Another NCDOT. This is a purchase of South Main Street property and Honor Air Park.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Speaking of the roundabout, in the south end of town on Greenville Highway, we have a slide that shows that is going to be where our current Honor Air Park is located. DOT has made an offer, actually a pretty generous offer of $443,250 for that property. It's about a third of an acre. There are appraisals and everything in the packet, but they also threw in, if you look and you see 46 and 47, those are remnants left over from where DOT took those parcels, but they don't need them for the improvements that they're making. And so they are giving us those parcels at no cost as part of the consideration for Honor Air Park. And so there is a resolution in your packet if you would like to accept this offer. And then as soon as we have the closing, we'll get that sum of money. Are there any questions about that? If you have project questions, Mr. Detweiler can answer that because it's not me.
Where does that money go?
The Brian question.
So the funding's going into a project ordinance for the costs that we'll have associated with the South Main Street improvements in that area.
And what are those improvements?
There's Brent, yeah.
The hot potato question.
So the plan is we've actually already engaged with Watermark to do a design similar to Brevard did something like this a few years ago where they actually worked with Watermark to do improvements within the middle or the center of the roundabout. You know, some landscaping and hardscaping. Things that would be approved by DOT because it is limited. You can't have things too high, so it's impacting sight distance around the roundabout. But the plan is, we have some preliminary drawings, but the plan is to have them design something for in the center of the roundabout here, whoops, here, in here, and even, this is still ours or was ours. It will be DOT's, but we're going to incorporate some, a little bit of vegetation and stuff in here. So the plan is to, like Brian said, the plan is to use the money to pay for that, and it would be done as with the roundabout project. We would insert our plans in with DOT's design for the roadway project, and they would do the work.
Do we think that that's going to cost $500,000 to do that roundabout?
You mean what we would be
Mhm.
proposing to improve? No, I don't think it was. I've got an estimate, but I honestly don't remember how much it was. I think it was short of that. I think it was a couple $100,000 to $250,000.
And then what happens with the rest of the money?
City council would have the opportunity to prioritize where that extra funding goes.
Are we looking at putting parking at 46 and 47 at all? Have we talked? I think I remember we were talking about it.
So the plan would be, so that's in the floodplain, potentially floodway. I think that's in the floodway. So likely not parking there, but we could use those funds to help leverage the Above the Mud project. The Above the Mud project, actually, that's what's so important. It's actually great that DOT's giving us these remnants because we can actually use this property. This property up here is the project that Mike's currently, the press release just went out today, Lower Mud Creek. That's where this is going on. So we can actually build a pedestrian bridge across Mud Creek in this area. Having these properties obviously allows us to do that. So there is a challenge in crossing both South Main and King Street, and how that happens. The way this is shown now, there are refuge islands here, that will be built as part of the roundabout. So that is a bit of a challenge, but the goal would be to connect the Akusta up in this direction to eventually to the Ocklawaha. But those funds could be used potentially for, to leverage or as part of the grant match for the.
And we're going to reapply for the RAISE grant as well, right?
They are due to release the notice of funding opportunity any day between now and, I think they said mid to late November was kind of the time range that we were given. Several staff had a debrief with USDOT staff member, I want to say 2 weeks ago. So we actually made it so far that there may be some decisions to make down the road, but we made it so far in the process that we may, if it's like past rounds of this funding, we may have been able to make it to the secretary's desk again because the project made it so far.
Because we're like the second highest scoring project, right?
We were in the highest tier, so we were considered a project of merit. So the projects of merit in years past for build or raise, whatever they were called in the past, would make it again. You wouldn't have to reapply for that project. It already would make it to that final round for the secretary to be able to pick and choose.
Would we include some of this DOT money for that property in our new RAISE grant application?
As a match, we could potentially. The challenge is the decision that will need to be made, and we'll come back to you for this later when we know more. But the challenge would be if we reapply, we start over.
Okay.
If we use the application that was submitted last year or early this year, then we wouldn't. There isn't an opportunity to reapply or adjust the application. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Anyone?
Madam Mayor, I move the city council adopt a resolution by the city of Hendersonville to accept the contingent offer of just compensation from the North Carolina Department of Transportation for South Main Street widening project.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of the resolution for accepting the offer, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, motion carries. Okay. Do that. Next, approval of letter to Henderson County Board of Commissioners. Mr. Condit?
Mayor Vogt, members of City Council, as we have been discussing over the last several months and years related to our ongoing negotiations with Henderson County, we previously have submitted a proposed interlocal agreement that at this point has not been taken up by the Board of Commissioners. Also, as far as we know, we do not foresee any local legislation moving forward. It would be difficult to move forward before the short session next year. So we've discussed with City Council about preparing a letter to the Board of Commissioners, which I have done, basically saying that we would like to, the City Council would like to move forward with amending the existing interlocal agreement to address things that we believe we agree on, such as the creation of the Water and Sewer Commission, contracts with the rural fire departments that are directly adjacent to the city, move forward with utility rate equalization and joint water and sewer planning to ensure that we provide adequate, efficient, and responsible utility service throughout the county. We'd like to incorporate with the letter our previously approved City Council interlocal agreement, amended interlocal agreement, as well as any maps and any previous documentation. Just we would send that to all Board of Commissioners, just let them know the City Council's wishes. Our proposal is that the City Council adopt this letter tonight as a whole. That way all of you can sign it, and we will distribute it to all county commissioners going forward. That way they all will have copies to review themselves. So.
Okay. Any discussion? Or a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that city council approve the proposed letter as written.
Is there any discussion? Not those in favor of the letter as written, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Ayes have it, motion carries. And we can send that off. Thank you. Okay, boards and committees. We have one opening on the planning board, and we have several applicants. Anyone wish to make a nomination?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to nominate Betsy Zafra.
Are there further nominations?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to appoint Andrea Martin to the planning board.
Okay. Are there further nominations? Not. Get my list up here. Not in here. Okay, what was the first name?
Betsy.
Betsy.
Zafra.
Spell the last name. I can't remember.
Zafra.
D-A.
Zafra.
Okay, Betsy. Okay. Betsy Zafra has been nominated. I will vote on them in the order in which they were nominated. So whichever receives the majority vote is the person who will be appointed. All those who wish to appoint Betsy Zafra to the planning board, say aye.
Aye.
We've got 2 ayes. And the mayor votes aye.
Aye.
Those in favor of Andrea Martin to the planning board, say aye.
Aye.
That has 2 votes. So Betsy Baffra has been appointed to the planning board effective immediately. And it is a partial term, and she will be eligible for a full 3-year term when that partial term expires. Okay. City manager report.
This will report that your September 2025 contingency and just put it in your packet for your. Nothing else. Nothing else, Mayor. Sorry.
Okay. That's all right. Council, anything you want to bring up? If not, okay. We will be going into a closed session. Someone wants to make that motion?
Madam Mayor, I move that city council enter closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A1 and 6 to prevent the disclosure of information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to the law of this state or of the United States, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, and to consider the qualifications, competence, performance, character, fitness of an individual public officer or employee.
Thank you. Any discussion? Not. Those in favor of entering closed session, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no. Ayes have it. We are in closed session. All right.